Hey, everybody. In this episode of the show, I invited my friend Fred to join me so that we could look back at the year 2022 and chat about some of the current events from the past 12 months. This is by no means a comprehensive year in review or anything like that, but just really between the two of us, we kind of chose some of the bigger stories from the year and we just kind of casually chatted about them. And in the first few minutes, I asked Fred about how his year went so that the listeners can get to know him a little bit before we start diving into talking about 2022's most popular music. And the music part starts around 8 minutes and 47 seconds. And then we talk about movies, and that starts around 29 minutes and 33 seconds. And finally, we got into talking about current events plus US and world news at 35 minutes and 17 seconds. Thanks to Fred for joining me. I know he's a busy man, but we used to co-host a show together, and it was always a lot of fun. So I kind of missed that, and I was glad that we were able to get together for this. And here we go.
The Great Big Intergalactic.
Hey, Fred.
What's going on, Caesar?
Not much. How you been? We're living in different cities now.
I know, very different cities. You got all the way down somewhere in Florida, and then there's me all the way in DC. We have evacuated Ohio, and now we are suddenly in two very different worlds. But because of our friendship, our bond between the Salad Man and the Mud Monster, we are still here providing wonderful content for all of you loyal listeners out there, or those of you who might be coming in for the first time. So for those of you coming in, repeat listeners or first-time listeners, welcome to the show. I am Fred the Mud Monster, otherwise the guy who talks too much.
And for those who don't know, we used to do a podcast in Cleveland together. And then I moved to Florida in January, and you moved.
Yeah. And I moved to DC in July. Well, really late June, early July. But I moved down to DC in order to start my PhD program, in order to get my history PhD. In other words, it seems like the more that I do things, the more likely I'm going to go down the route of academia and being a historian outright professionally. And it's kind of fun, but extremely nerve-wracking, because now every professor goes, oh, have you read X book, Y book? Have you read these 10 different books that are known in the field? And you go, yeah, totally have.
And we're working on a little bit of a history podcast ourselves, although it's moving slowly.
Oh, well, it's in part because our schedules are nutty, mostly mine.
Right.
History PhDs are not a good thing for scheduling. They go, well, what time are you available? Are you available at 3 a.m.? Because that's the only time I got.
But, you know, all that hard work will pay off one of these days.
Well, you have to wait a couple, 4 or 5 years. But, you know, after the tears and probably some drinking, I'll somehow make it through, and I'll get that cap and gown where I get hooded. So then I get 3 sashes on my graduation robe, and I get to be hooded by my PhD advisor, who I don't know yet. I don't know who my one-on-one advisor will be, but in about a year or two, I will. And then I'll get a special hood, so that way people know, like, this guy has spent too much money in academia, and now you get a special hood that costs you $5.
Anything else exciting happening in your world?
Oh, well, I've been joining up in local sports groups, and I am now known as the big guy who moves incredibly fast for his size. So I'm now known as a very uniquely athletic person and someone who's known for excellent hands, which I really feel is wonderful, because you have to understand, when I was a little boy, I was known for stone cold hands.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember like the Sea of Hands play in the 1970s, the Raiders and the Dolphins?
No, I don't think I remember that one.
So there's this famous play where the Raiders quarterback throws this ball, and there's like 10 different hands on the ball in the end zone. And this Raiders player, who's known for dropping passes, he caught the pass, the game-winning pass. And it was this huge moment for him, because he actually dropped passes throughout the game, and he was known for cold stone hands. Understand, when I was a little boy, if I were in that situation, not only would I drop the ball, I'd probably drop the ball to the other team, because my hands are that terrible. So to now be known as someone who doesn't drop anything, and pretty much everyone just goes, if he gets near the ball or the disc, just don't even try, because he will haul it in. Now even all the experienced players go, you got it. I'm not going to try and stop you. You're too big and you're too strong. And I'm like, thank you. And I just haul it in with immense flair.
So Fred's got great hands, ladies.
That's right. I am the soft touch, the Midas touch, if you will.
Well, it sounds like you're getting touched by a guy from a auto shop.
The
Midas.
Now I'm thinking, O'Reilly's auto hands, and just going, oh no, not now. I'm trying to think anything else that's really happened in my life. Really, it's been the best year of my life. I got my master's degree before going to PhD, so that was big. I got my second set of robes, and trust me, having two sets of robes is really annoying because you have to now you have two of them, and people go, "Why do you have two?" And you have to say, "Well, I went to undergrad for one school, and then my master's work for another, and now going to a third school, I have a third set of robes." And these set of robes are going to be very expensive. Like I think they're $400, $500 just to get your hands on the PhD robes, just because they go, well, hold on. It takes a long time. It takes 10 more hours to add an additional sachet to your robe. And you get special colors. And it's a really interesting time. So, I'm kind of looking forward to that expenditure down the road when they go, just one more major expensive buy before you get your PhD and become an official Dr. Mud Monster. I'm trying to think anything else that really comes to mind. I've been trying all different foods in DC. Someone spat at me. That was kind of just a fun little chapter. Oh, I was doing all types of research at the Library of Congress. So they got to know me and they're like, where are these mud puddles in the Library of Congress? I thought we cleaned this up. But no, it was me coming in literally almost every day for about 2 months, just going, do you have these articles I'm looking for? Doing research, not even for academic stuff, but just for work. And people go, that's a really specific article, but you can try and find it. I was really blowing the dust off those books, man, to find these articles I was looking for, going, you have anything from 1950? 1950, sure, but you got to go way in the back. You see a spider crawling your arm, like, oh.
You still use those old school libraries with the books, huh?
Oh, yeah, I know.
I just go there to get DVDs. They're free there.
That's true. But the Library of Congress is all free. And it's wonderful, too, because you get all types of wonderful access. So I became what's called an official researcher within the Library of Congress, which means I have a card. I can go through and show it to the police guards who are guarding the major libraries, because there's like 3 of them that you can go into. And there's one that's only available to researchers. So I got the card, and I'm now able to go through all the libraries. Now, on top of it, and I can talk about this because this is not a well-kept secret, but there are secret tunnels underneath all the libraries that you can walk through to get to each part of the library underground. So I have access because I'm a researcher. So I can just show my card and I can walk through the equivalent of like 10 miles of tunnels. Wow. Just don't go near the janitor's closet. They don't want you there.
Like catacombs, huh?
Yeah, I'm afraid there's no dead bodies, though. It's just janitor closet material and probably doors to other secret tunnels for like congressmen in case if they get attacked or something like that. So I think they're all connected to even more secretive tunnels. But alas, I'm only a researcher. I do not have government verification. I do have my childhood friend, though, who has a pretty high level government verification. I can't say what level, though. Otherwise, they will kill me for sure. But enough about me, secret. I guess. Let's talk about the year, right?
Yeah, let's get into that. This is our 2022 year in review and more about world events and things that are happening in society. We're going to be casual. This isn't too serious. We're just kind of doing like a yearbook. We didn't do as much studying as we probably should have.
Well, you did all the studying. I am just here as a sexy ornament. Because of how life has turned out for the Mud Monster, unfortunately, I did not do my due diligence. So I apologize for behalf of all of the listeners. I'm here as a very sexy voice, as a very sexy narrator. But if you want to talk about who did all the front leg work for this, you got to thank Caesar. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I didn't do that much work.
But you did something. That's more important than me.
I just don't want people. I just don't want people to get their expectations too high before we start here.
I mean, it is us, Caesar. Their expectations are never up. I guess, why don't you start off, Caesar? What I see, you got a couple of songs here that even I've not heard of.
Yeah.
So some of the top songs of 2022.
All right. Heat Waves by Glass Animals. Are you familiar with that one?
I've heard of the Glass Animals, the group, but I've never even heard of Heat Waves. Do you have like a tune that goes with
Uh,
it?
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late night in
Oh,
the
that
middle
song.
of
Yeah.
June. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So just to note for listeners, his phone didn't quite work. It kind of came out as a whimper. So now you get to hear his wonderful, powerful singing voice.
Well, we always used to sing on our old one, so I don't know why we wouldn't on this one.
That's
On our
true.
old podcast.
That's true indeed. So then there's As It Was by Harry Styles. I've heard this one. I actually know what the song is. And it's kind of interesting. Harry Styles got into some very hot water, though, over his former girlfriend, the person who made a very controversial movie, which is Don't Worry, Darling. Like the girlfriend directed the movie and like all the stars fell out. Everyone got into a big cat fight. So Harry Styles got in a little bit of hot water, but his fans still love him. I think then there's a Stay by Kid Laroi and Justin Bieber. Did you know Kid Laroi is Australian?
No.
But it's one of the popular ones. Then you have Cold Heart, which I'm still surprised Elton John's still playing. Let's keep it a buck. Elton John's in the 70s. And it's pretty amazing that he's still going, yeah, let me just play this music for you right quick. And it's mostly sung, though, by Dua Lipa, who's now become a British sensation over the past couple of years. So it's kind of fun to see that Dua Lipa is doing her thing with Elton John. But it seems like if you have to be a pop star, you got to sing with Elton John at some point. Even Eminem did it.
Yeah. That song was popular when I was a kid. Cold Heart, the original version of it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Who was the original? Was that Elton John?
Yeah, it was Elton John originally. It doesn't sound exactly the same. I get frustrated sometimes when people remake old songs. Although when Elton John's actually part of it, you can't really be too upset because
that's true.
It's like she's got his blessing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but at the same time, though, it seems like every artist is kind of doing a little bit of a ripoff of Elton John. And Dua Lipa is known for her retro style of performance, which to me is just like, rip off. Very hot take. Do not sue me, please, Ms. Lipa. I'm only just, as the British say, taking the piss.
Surprisingly, I really enjoy some of the pop music from recent years. There was a time where I couldn't stand to listen to top 40, but, artists like Dua Lipa and Harry Styles, I quite enjoy some of their stuff,
Oh, that's good because I'm a little bit more of not my style, but I appreciate what they do. Then we have another person from the UK, and that's Ed Sheeran. I never got it right. Ed Sheeran with Shivers.
Yeah, he's got two there, and he's got Bad Habits as well. So he had a big year.
Yeah, he had it seems like Ed Sheeran has a big year every year. Although he's definitely the king of teenage croons where all the teenage girls and boys go, oh, that's so lovely. Oh, Ed Sheeran, you understand my pain. It's like, okay, not my cup of tea. I do have a couple things from Ed Sheeran, but I kind of think of Ed Sheeran as a little bit of a more for someone even younger than me, and I'm in my mid-20s. So
his Multiply album was a good one. I don't know if you ever heard that, but I pretty much enjoyed that. I enjoyed that one from front to back. Every time I hear a new song from him, I think, who is this? And I was like, oh, it's Ed Sheeran. Like his sound changes almost every time.
That's true. And I think, what do you think, Caesar? We just speed run through the rest of these? We do have the rest of the year to cover.
Easy on Me by Adele. ABCDEFU by Gail. That one didn't make a lot of sense on the radio, but once you realize it's actually just ABCDEFU, that makes more sense than the radio version. Imagine Dragons Enemy. Save Your Tears for Another Day. And I thought that was a song from last year, but when I did this research, I looked it up and apparently it was a very popular song this year, like one of the top ones. And apparently he sampled his own song and a year later and got a second hit out of it because Ariana Grande's on it this time.
There's not much Ariana Grande on this, but I know she got married, so maybe she's focused on just focusing on the relationship, which makes sense. Now we got the whole country, and of course we know country got plenty of wonderful hits coming out this year.
I'm going to guess that you don't know any of these, so I'm going to speed through them.
I actually know some of them, actually. I know the artist, that's for sure. I do know the artist.
Yeah. The Kind of Love We Make by Luke Combs.
I have a funny story
go
about
ahead.
Luke Combs. So back in Cleveland, there's a concert, and Luke Combs was singing. And so all these people from outside of Cleveland were coming in. So it's me and like three other black guys. on the train. It was all these other, and it's like 100 white people on this train. So including the Mud Monster, in case you didn't know. And so what's kind of interesting is we see all these people going, and the black patrons on the train go, where are those white folks going? They can't be. I've never seen that many in forever. And I'm like, I guess there's a Luke Combs concert, and someone heard us, and they went, woo, yeah, Luke Combs. And then they threw up on the train. Had a little bit too much pregame, unfortunately.
Oh, boy.
It was a kind of a funny sight to behold. And then the rest of the train ride, those four, me and the other three, just kept talking about the craziness of the concert and like, how is Luke Combs that popular? But he had the whole Brown Stadium just packed with fans. It was quite the sight to behold.
Well, he's had several songs in the last couple of years that were really popular. Every time I hear one, I'm like, I kind of like this song. What is it? And then it turns out to be Luke Combs. So
yeah,
he is popular and he is talented, but everything's divided up into genres. So like a lot of people, I'm always surprised how specific and niche everything is nowadays. But then you go and you look, and something you've never heard of has like 3 million views or whatever on YouTube,
I know, it's nutty. It's like we've become detached from popular culture, Caesar. We've become archaic. Well, you're more in tune than I am. So, for example, I don't even know who Cole Swindle is. This is the next song.
Cole Swindell. She had me at Heads Carolina. I am actually not a huge fan of this song because it is another remake, as we talked about earlier.
Another one.
It's kind of like that whole Elton John Dua Lipa thing where this was an old Jody Messina song. And I knew Jody Messina at one point. So kind of annoys me that they kind of ripped that song off. I'm sure she got paid for it though. So whatever,
Hopefully. I mean, so long as, but you know how people sell their masters, it gets a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Anyways. And then you have a Damn Straight by Scott McCreery. Is that the guy that won American Idol or was close many years ago? Was it that guy?
Oh, let's look it up. I know the song, but I'm not familiar with this. What's it called?
Yeah, I think it's him. Or I could be terribly wrong. Yes. He rose to fame after winning the 10th season of American Idol. Thank you, Wikipedia. I thought I recognized that name. Wow, he's not even 30. I thought he kind of just flamed out of the music industry. That just shows how outdated I am. Now he's got a hit song.
And again, that's another one of those songs where it's kind of simultaneously a tribute and a kind of a ripoff of other people's songs. So Damn Straight has two meanings there. It's about, damn straight is a saying that country people use. And then also straight refers to George Strait. So they take a lot of George Strait's lyrics and refer to him in the song. So
interesting. So then you have Son of a Sinner by Jelly Roll. I actually know who this guy is.
Oh, really?
Isn't he kind of more of a country rapper, technically? Like he mixes the two genres quite a bit. I know that he has a couple of songs that swayed more to the Trumpian side of things, or at least he has associates who have songs that swing to the Trumpian side of things. But I still gave the music a shot, and despite my own perhaps personal political objections, the music's good, so I just go bravo.
Yeah. And speaking of political objections, Morgan Wallen, the guy who got 3 times more famous once he got canceled for saying some things he shouldn't have said. Had 3 number 1 songs, or 1, 2, and 3 all at the same time, and the country hits just recently. And one of those songs was "Wasted on You."
Yeah. I know that he's kind of like the new age of country, right? Like he's kind of the popular one amongst people in their early 20s, right? Like, or do I have that wrong?
Probably, yeah. I think that's fair to say. Probably a little bit of everybody. A lot of these guys are young, and like when you're old, it's as somebody who's much older than you are, it's a weird feeling. Like the other day, I found this local artist here in Florida, and she was like probably in her early 20s. Singing a love song, and I love the song, but it feels weird being my age and liking a 21-year-old singer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could understand that.
You'll probably start to notice when you watch college football. It's, when you were in high school and you were watching college football, it's like, oh, these older guys are awesome football players. And then you become their age and you're like, oh, these guys are my age. And then you get older than them. And it's like,
I'm starting to get the feeling now.
These guys are just out of high school. And when they screw up on the field, I just feel bad about it. I'm not angry. I'm like, oh, that poor 19-year-old,
Yeah.
His girlfriend probably broke up with him last night. That's why he's having a
Probably.
bad game.
And then you have the trouble of the heartbreak. I do know who Jason Aldean is. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I think I was in Nashville when he became popular. So I
Oh,
I went to a free concert with him once when he was like, I think he had one hit at the time, but I took, my niece gave me a Flat Stanley. Have you ever heard of Flat Stanley?
no.
It's like these little cutout characters that you take pictures of different things. I'm not sure how to explain it. It's so that she can show and tell. Like, hey, my Flat Stanley went to Nashville kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Huh.
But I remember at the time, I sent the picture back and they're like, we don't know who Jason Aldean is. Like, oh,
You're right. You just going,
she's an adult now and she's big into country. So I'm going to have to go back and ask her, like, do you remember when I sent you a Flat Stanley? You didn't know who Jason Aldean was?
yeah, it's definitely weird for sure. But, I'm glad that I now know what Flat Stanley is. But I don't know if I'll use it in the future. But maybe, who knows? Then we got 23. I have heard of Sam Hunt before. He had didn't he have that song that's body like a back road?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
But that's all I know him for. So again, I thought he'd be one hit wonder, and he's somehow here again.
Till You Can't by Cody Johnson.
I have no idea who that is.
Thinking About You by Dustin Lynch.
I don't know who that is.
Take My Name by Parma Lee.
Hey, Parma, that you have a close name. You have a close connection with Parma, just not the singer.
Yeah, Parma, Ohio. Moon over Parma Lee tonight, right? For anybody who doesn't know, that was from the Drew Carey show. It was about a town near Cleveland called Parma, which is quite a reputation of being weird.
But it's also the place where Chef Boyardee, I think, did hit guy's career kind of going. So in case you want to know about how Chef Boyardee's all over your shelves, you can think little old town of Parma, Ohio. Just a little bit of a shout out from our previous show.
Let me ask you a question. I don't really know a lot about hip hop. I was curious if you had any songs that you thought were really good this year.
I do. And let me tell you, though, I need to preface by saying this. I do have some songs, but I used to be so much more in tune with music. Like I would be able to do a list like this, go from pop, country, rap, rock. I could do it in 2021, 2020. But when you start to be in the PhD world, for those who are perhaps never going to get into that world, let me tell you, all you're focusing on is your work and your research. And by the time your semester is over, you don't even know who died. You don't even know what's going on in half of the world. You are just left completely clueless. And as the senior mud monsters will tell you, you can sometimes be outdated by years. You don't even know half of the trends. You're just going, oh, you're catching up in the holiday season. So I've spent a good chunk of my time just going, what's that?
Well, this should be a quality episode then.
Oh, absolutely. But luckily, I found some things I've actually heard and actually know that there's some big songs, and I kind of think that they're interesting. So you have Pushin' P by Future. That's kind of more of a TikTok trend. Now so many of these hip hop songs are defined by TikTok and they get big due to TikTok and memes and things of that nature. In a Minute by Lil Baby. Cash In, Cash Out by Pharrell Williams. Pharrell Williams is making so much money and making still so many great hits year after year. That guy's been doing it since, I think, the late 90s.
Yeah, wow.
Then you got Kentucky's own Jack Harlow with Nail Tech, a song that people were very divided about, not because it was controversial, but because it was decisively average.
I like that First Class song. That was pretty good.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty decent. And then you got a couple
Lamorous, and then he says a bunch of things in between. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat too. Let's see. And then you got, of course, the Johnny P's Caddy. I actually like this song a lot. It's not the most popular, but I thought it was a great song. Johnny P's Caddy by Benny the Butcher, Buffalo's Own, I do believe. So if you guys are interested in that, you can check out that song. I was released in probably mid-2022. It did have J. Cole on it, so, definitely got some mainstream appeal. And then you got Do It Again by NLE Choppa, who is kind of more one of these more trap rappers than anything else. And then you got plenty of other songs on here too. Don't worry, I have more. Kendrick Lamar released a huge album this year. So you have N95, which is kind of like maybe one of the bigger songs on there by Kendrick Lamar. And then We Cry Together was pretty big too. but a very edgy, kind of very emotional song. That one's kind of a very hard listen. For those who have listened to it, I have actually listened to that song, and I won't go too deep into what all the lyrics mean, but let's just say that it's a couple that argues and then comes back together in a very toxic way.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
It's a great song when you go through it. But if someone says I can relate to this song, your relationships have had a big problem.
I'll have to give some of these a listen.
And then we have, of course, I think it's the Freaky Girl, which is actually, strange enough, a remix of an older song because super freaky, so it's by Rick James, right? So
is this the Nicki Minaj thing?
Yes.
Ooh.
This is the one where she kind of talks about all these sexual different innuendos. Well, not innuendos, she outright says them. So that's a really big song. I know that a lot of people were into Nicki Minaj kind of coming back in a big way in 2022. And then
I got a question. How do you feel about some of these lyrics that you hear in hip hop and like Nicki Minaj and what was the one? Who was it? Cardi B who did WAP stuff like that.
Yes, Cardi B did do WAP with Megan Thee Stallion. But I'll tell you, as me going through the PhD programs actually changed my perception on this. So before my PhD program, I thought, well, the lyrics are a little over the top. Like, why do we need this? Like, women can just, talk about different topics, but it seems like the songs that get so popular are, excuse my language, the pussy popping songs, right? Yeah. So you kind of just sit there and you go, but women are much more complex than that. And it feel like that the hip hop community kind of puts women rappers in a very tiny box. And then when it comes to my PhD program, because I study at an HBCU, in fact, it's a school now in the top 100 in America. So I won't go too much into it, but, it's pretty cool to be at a school that's pretty far up there in the academic rankings. But what we learned at school is that for a lot of these Black women rappers, in the end, it's empowering because they didn't get to talk about this as much in their younger days or in their childhood. So to openly express it now is a way for them to feel like they're breaking out of their shell. So now I kind of sit in the middle where it's like, I'm cool with all the pussy popping songs, but can we just, it doesn't have to be every popular song has to be a song like that. Now I know, obviously I'm over summarizing. There are plenty of women rappers who have songs that do not deal with that, but it seems like they often kind of go down that route. And that kind of is a little bit disappointing. But again, I am just a mud monster, so I cannot fully comprehend or understand the Black experience, even though I study Black history as a PhD person. So there's always that gap. But in the end, I think that's just, it comes down to, it's cool, but does everyone have to do it? And at some point you kind of go like, okay, I get it. You're, I know that maybe your one's labia is better than the other. Okay, I think we get it.
I listened to an interview with how's her name's pronounced? Maren Morris, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
She's a country artist, and she was talking about how the country music industry is keeping her down, and she wishes she could be more like Cardi B, and
Yeah, I get it.
I don't know. I mean, she chose to be a country singer,
Yeah, I think.
I don't need to hear about Maren Morris's WAP.
Well, it might be interesting. You never know. So, again, I'm all for it. Just, I just wish that not every woman rapper would get popular because of it. I'd like to go back to Queen Latifah, Rod Digga, something like that. Where they got popular just because they were good at rhyming and they talked about their life. I'm cool with that, So,
but it's like you said, women are complex and.
Yeah.
But lyrics like that just kind of seem to be antithetical to everything I know about women, It's just just
it's complicated. But
if you were to use that language around a woman, she'd be disgusted with you. You know what I mean?
It's a little bit strange, isn't it? One can say it for the radio, but then when it comes to saying it to the person, they go, "Oh, you're a disgusting pig." So it is kind of interesting just to see what's kind of used in different contexts.
All right, movies.
I've seen the trailers for Top Gun Maverick. I have seen Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was brilliant. I love that movie. I say that was just me and my dad. We watched it only a couple days ago, actually. It's of course it's kind of a brilliant critique of Asian American culture and like how it all works. But not only that, but it also kind of critiques kind of like how we can be indecisive as humans, and it leads to some not great moments in our lives. But it's also just hilarious because there are some strange scenes in there, man. Like out there, like this is an absurdist film. Like, this is one of those films where it's like it's a little bit art housey, but it's a great ride to kind of go through. And I think it's done brilliantly. And Michelle Yeoh is just fantastic.
One of the most fascinating scenes from that movie, she kept reliving certain moments. And
Right.
every once in a while, she'd jump back into time and she would relive this moment where they bought a laundromat. Her and her husband bought a laundromat. And he says, all of this is ours. All these washing machines are ours. And he was so excited about it. And I couldn't tell from the beginning. And that's kind of the theme of the movie. You couldn't tell if she was happy or unhappy with all the things that were happening. She just didn't seem to share the enthusiasm about owning a laundromat that he did, at least at first.
Yeah.
And she kept reliving that moment. And it's something that rang true to me because I just don't get excited about things that other people do. And just to see somebody who was that excited about owning a bunch of washing machines and that was going to be his life, tending to washing machines for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
It's just whatever feeling that she had in her head, I just related to it. Like, oh,
absolutely.
This is our life now,
I actually would like the laundromat because I think it'd be pretty interesting to see what people would leave change and they go, you won't believe what I found today. Treasure trove, a cornucopia of wonderful little things. I found a coin. I found a dildo. I found someone's panties that were not fully washed. I found someone's boxers that had pizza stains on them. It was a wonderful day of looking at disgusting things.
I think you probably share the same sentiment as the guy in that movie then.
Oh, no, I really related to that guy, particularly near the end when he talked about his philosophy of dealing with life. I'm like, that is totally me. And now I see him like, oh, I am definitely like the smart but sometimes lovable idiot. Like, I get it. And then we got the rest of these, right? So Jurassic World, I've not seen that one. Avatar: The Way of Water, that took 12 years to get the sequel. How are people still hyped for this movie? Just by the principle of Avatar taking 12, 13 years to make, I would be like, forget it. It can't be that good.
Yeah, that first one was really political.
Yeah.
And I actually went back and watched it the other day, or not the other day, like maybe a year ago or so, a little, like just a few minutes of it. And I thought, it can't be bad as I remember it being. And I put it in. And I felt the same way when I watched the early remakes of Star Wars, like episode 1, 2, and 3. Stuff that was state of the art back then looks like animation now.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because that was 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And
I get exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And so when I watched some of the trailers of Avatar 2, The Way of Water, I'm like, oh, is this going to be more like a cartoon,
Yeah, I get that. And then you got the Batman. I did not see this one. I heard it's quite gritty though. And it's got the Riddler in it. And I think Robert Pattinson's the Batman this time. So that's kind of a really interesting take to go for some teenage heartthrob in Twilight and Harry Potter to now the person who beats up and kills criminals on the big screens. A little bit of a dramatic shift.
I have no interest in watching Superman, Batman, Spider-Man remakes anymore.
Oh, then there was also that big movie though that Spider-Man is in No Way Home. I think that was huge. That was all over the place. To get the original Spider-Man from the live actions, which was to get Tobey Maguire back was pretty fun.
Right. And I was a fan of the first series, at least the first two, Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst.
I find Tom Holland to be a pretty good Spider-Man, so I think it's a great way to kind of tie everything together. Then we have, I think this is the Jordan Peele movie, right? Nope.
Yes.
I've not seen it. I should though, but I've not seen it.
I was annoyed by his remake of The Twilight Zone. It was a little too woke for my tastes. And again, we're talking about remakes, and I just hate when people remake everything instead of coming up with their own ideas. And
I know Martin Scorsese has a point. When most of the movies are just remakes or just franchise films, are you really kind of going out there and pushing the edges of movie making? And it seems a little bit like, hey, like this is a little bit straightforward. Like, how can you get new directors to suddenly become popular if they are caught just in being being part of the movie franchise machine. You
But
know,
at least-
where are the art houses?
But at least Nope is a original movie. It's his own idea,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think. You know what? And I love Key and Peele.
Mhm.
Key and Peele, sorry. I was watching some of that the other day and I was laughing so hard I hurt. But, just whatever he did in Key and Peele, Twilight Zone, the remake, just turned me off so bad. I've lost interest in his stuff.
I mean, but I know for those of you who might have been curious about us talking about Jordan Peele's film, we apologize that we can't talk about too much in depth because, again, we got the rest of the year to cover, including maybe the big thing of 2022, like the biggest thing, which is, war, obviously, because what's human history without some major conflict, right?
Right.
Which is,
and I think this came as a surprise to a lot of us. But
Yeah.
I suppose if you're paying it closer attention, maybe it wouldn't be such a surprise. I mean, a lot of people say that this is a war that's been going on since 2014.
of course, if you've not figured out by now, we're talking about Russia invading the Ukraine, which has been kind of the big talk of the town for months now. And it's been kind of interesting to see back and forth where it's been going on. And I think it's pretty interesting that what is kind of interesting is that Russia and Ukraine have always had bad blood between them since probably the 20th century. I mean, why wouldn't you? When the head of the Soviet Union starves out your people by the millions in the 1930s, you kind of don't forget that. So at least there's kind of always bad blood between these two countries. And it just popped in a bad way because Putin just wanted to recreate the Soviet Union, wants to create his own empire all over again. And it's like, I don't know, newsflash, dude, but I don't think nobody wants an empire in 2022. So, of course, he thought, well, they'll just kind of fall over and this will be over. And then Ukraine and the rest of the world kind of said, no, this is not happening.
Corporations are empires now.
Yes, that's right. We're finding the corporate entities now. That's very good. It's said by the man whose namesake is often used by corporations to make millions. Those Caesar salads are a major corporate entity.
Right. Big salad.
That's right. Big salads coming after you, man. You get the Martin Shkreli of a salad, raising it by like 2,000%. What do you mean it's $20 for a salad?
But a lot of things happen, not just the war. Of course, the deaths are the obvious thing, the worst part of all of it. But then there's like a refugee crisis, and then it caused fuel to go up in price around the world.
Yeah, was it as high as $5 in Florida? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it maybe like $4.90 something at one point.
If you round it up by 10 cents, yeah,
right.
It's basically too high. So.
And I'm sure it's more in California,
Oh, I think I was hearing this again up to 7, I think, at one point. Just from things I heard. But then again, don't quote me on that. I am not the know-it-all. If you're talking about history, I could be a little bit of a encyclopedia. But in terms of current events, I go, you just kind of shrug.
Right. And of course, there was a lot of American spending that went to Ukraine to buy weapons.
Yeah, billions and billions of dollars. But it's kind of working out. The Ukrainians are winning the war now. They're really pushing hard on the Russians. But now we're kind of in that phase, though, where people are kind of hunkering down. Russia's trying to hold on to the Crimea, which kind of the big question mark is, can the Ukraine get the Crimea back? And it's been kind of interesting. They've been kind of predicting that the Russian military will collapse for a while. So credit to Russia. They've been trying to hold on. They just also failed in their initial objective of capturing more of the Ukraine. And now it seems like they're about to lose the things that they had, that they got in 2014, that's kind of a big, massive failure on the government's part. So we'll see how that war goes on. I'm afraid we are only probably in year 1 of a multi-year conflict. So if you're expecting eggs to go down from 342 in October to back down to 150 in January, yes, this is in our notes, then I'm afraid to burst your bubble. But it ain't happening. We still got a couple of years to go.
I haven't bought eggs this entire year.
Really? I have.
You really?
It's not too bad.
I'm not paying $3.42 for something that comes out of a chicken's butt.
I suppose that would be Mr. Salad Man.
This would have been a good year to raise chickens,
Oh, there's not been. That my apartment complex has a nice little garden up there. I could have just kept a chicken up there.
Yeah. Although I'm sure that chicken feed probably costs more too. Everything's gone up in price.
Everything.
Inflation.
Well, of course, yeah, inflation and everything else. But not only that, though, it seems like mass shootings have also gone up. And this is a very awkward transition. But, we got to talk about all these unfortunate mass shootings that have occurred throughout the year, including obviously perhaps the most known one for this year, which is the Uvalde shooting, which was kind of of course, it's tragic. It's one of these moments in American history that you wish you weren't alive to see and witness, but it was a massive failure of the police. It was a massive failure of the school administration. I mean, it got so bad. I think they completely got rid of the school, or it's defunct now, or they demolished it. And now all the police are under investigation or have been fired at some point in time, and now all the kids that were in Uvalde have been transferred out to different schools. And it got so bad at one point that the mother and father of one of the children, they died, I think, days apart out of heartbreak because it was just too much. I mean, why? I get it. Why would you want to be on this earth when your child gets brutally taken away from you by some 18-year-old nutcase?
Right. Well, that was definitely the most horrifying of them all, but they're all horrifying.
But there's unfortunately more.
Right. And there was a New York City subway attack where 10 people were killed. In addition to that, there was a shooting at a Tops Friendly Market in Buffalo, New York, where 10 people also died. And I think that one was more racially motivated, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, we can keep going on and on about who else has been shot, the murder rate and everything else. But I think people know that guns are a little bit of a hot button topic in America. And perhaps we will keep our mouths shut about the topic because we do not want to be at the barrel of any gun or some protest person going, you guys are monsters. So we'll just keep our mouths shut and just go, this is all tragic. And we just hope for some resolution to this problem in the long term that can satisfy all parties.
I endured my first ever hurricane this year.
Oh, really? You did?
Yeah,
That was your first one?
I had like 2.5 days off, and then that was like butted up against the weekend. Hurricane Ian.
I mean, I live in a place where hurricanes weren't that popular. So
you got to
run it by me, Caesar. What was your hurricane experience like?
I won't go into details about what it was like for me because that could take a while and it's really not all that interesting. But I think like almost over 125 people on the west coast of Florida actually died. And
oh yeah,
I've
seen some of the pictures, how destructive it was.
It just decimated these coastal towns. It's really sad. It wasn't so bad for me where I'm at. It was more like, hey, I get to go day drinking.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. I think it's much the same for my uncle, who also lives in Florida, but he was closer to the hurricane strike zone. He just talked about all the houses that were wrecked and everything else. And, I mean, what else can we say? Hurricanes are not that exciting other than the fact that they're pure entities of destruction. So there's not much else to it.
Right. It was a bizarre feeling because I started to understand what it was like to not know where the hurricane was coming. I've always, when I've heard stories about hurricanes, I'm like, why don't these people leave? But being here in person makes me realize that, I get why, because you don't know where it's coming. And the difference between a few miles could be the difference between having to evacuate and not having to evacuate. And by the time you know for sure, and maybe you have to work, Yeah. Or maybe you don't have $300 to spend on a hotel and gas,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of get it now. And it's the other odd thing about it is like, yay, I didn't get killed, but all these other people did. So it's like a very bizarre mixed emotion kind of thing.
No, I totally get that. But I think speaking of hurricanes more on the metaphorical level, though, we got to talk about COVID, the hurricane that's swept now for 2 years across all our lives.
It kind of died down this year a little bit. The hysteria over it. But
there definitely been spikes in cases. It's just that I think people kind of go, if people kind of know, and if you didn't take the vaccine, there are a lot of people just go, well, you can't. What do you expect? You're in the hospital, and then it's kind of now become well, you kind of know what you signed up for.
Well, which is weird because that was always the conservative perspective.
Yeah.
But the liberals finally caught on. It's like, okay, well, if they want to die, if they want to risk it, that's their choice. But that was always the conservatives' opinion. But
I think it is pretty fascinating to see how political viewpoints eventually get adopted by the other. Conservative becomes liberal and liberal becomes conservative. It's a very, American political history is a very fascinating that I won't go into. Otherwise, I'm going to be here talking and rambling for so long that Caesar's salad would become rotten.
And I'm not going to put a lot of political opinions in on this episode, but I do have this one. Biden's decision to try to make everybody to get mandatory vaccines, that was pure evil. I mean, feel free to fire back.
But I get what you're saying. I respectfully disagree, but I understand where you're coming from. And I think it could be a little bit, I think the proposal was done a little bit wrong, and maybe just the wording was very bad. So it led to, of course, the fallout that came out from that decision to try and implement this thing.
Well, I mean, tens of millions of Americans didn't want to get a vaccine. And Biden said, well, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to get you fired from your job. And I think that's really screwed up.
Oh, I think that is crazy. But luckily, I think the law kind of stepped in and went, okay, we get why you're trying to save the country and save lives, but this is kind of getting a little bit tyrannical. So we're going to have to just say unconstitutional.
Right. Thank God for the Supreme Court. And also, I think something else that kind of probably changed his mind was what was happening in Canada with the trucker strike.
Yes.
Where they shut down the Ambassador Bridge to Detroit. The truckers did because they didn't want to get vaccines.
Right.
And the Canadian government froze their bank accounts.
So I heard about that. Yeah.
So as tyrannical as it was here in the US, it was even more so in Canada. And I'm sure.
At least for the truckers. Yeah. I can see why they have legitimate gripes. I understand. But then, of course, I guess the next big Supreme Court thing, and we have to talk about this, Roe v. Wade finally fell after decades of debate, which has been kind of fascinating. And I'm definitely more on the side of this was the wrong idea to try and strike down Roe v. Wade. But then again, I understand that for those who are really passionate about the religious side of what this procedure does, I understand that is something that's a step too far. And so I kind of appreciate where the direction has gone, where now it's kind of more in the hands of the states and the law, like the government, I think, passed some laws that kind of give protections to abortions, but also still gives the states some leeway as to what to do. I think it could be interesting to see where this goes. Obviously, it's terrifying for many women, but also it's a victory for religious conservatives. So it's a very kind of interesting effect that comes out of Roe v. Wade, wouldn't you say?
I don't have a ton of opinions on this because it's such a complex issue.
Yeah, you're telling me.
And I would say that I was surprised at the reaction that not as many, maybe like moderate to conservative people were as excited about this as I thought they might be.
Yeah, I think because it's one of those political hot buttons, because I really do think Roe v. Wade kind of doomed the Republicans in the 2022 midterms, which I guess we might as well talk about it now.
Right.
Which was kind of like this idea of a red tsunami, and as many pundits have now called it a red puddle.
I can't believe that they were so wrong. Like, they didn't have to predict a red wave. All they had to do was just sit and wait. But these conservative pundits were just saying, it's going to happen. The conservatives are going to destroy the liberals. And it just did not happen. Like, it didn't happen at all. Like, not only was it underwhelming, it was nothing.
Well, I mean, they still controlled the House, but they lost the Senate outright, which was kind of shocking. I really was not prepared to see. I thought Warnock was a goner, and then Walker. Then it was a runoff, and then Warnock, just completely knocks off Walker during the runoff elections, which I kept a close eye on. So it was kind of a surprising twist. I was like, wow, I did not expect this. A lot of people were saying this is like the biggest midterm election win for Democrats in the year that a Democratic president's in office, which is pretty substantial. So clearly, the Republican side of things, the think pieces and the think tanks clearly angered the American people enough that it led to this now led to this blue wall, which will be interesting to see come 2024 how that goes, because that will be where the blue wall will be truly really tested.
There was, a lot of supply issues this year, as there was in previous years. One of the big things was a baby formula shortage. That's pretty brutal for a new mom, right?
Oh, absolutely. But also, the whole infant respiratory stuff that was happening. A professor of mine, actually, poor kid, they believe he had it. And it was kind of a chaotic moment. But I know that there are plenty of children that unfortunately were affected by, I think it's called RSV or something like that. And it just affected so many kids. But yeah, the baby formula thing, I can't imagine. Just jokingly, of course, it sounds brutal, but yeah, it was a pretty bad year to be born, 2022. Mm-hmm. Like, kind of couldn't you just stayed in the womb a little bit longer, wait until 2023, But hey, you can't, birth is birth. You can't stop it. So, it's just, I'm just glad for the mothers and fathers who are able to get their kids through this year, get those infants to the next year. So, shout out to y'all. Y'all had a brutal year.
Well, speaking of which, I think we're probably going to see what kids who grew up like when they were 5 years old, 6 years old, whatever, like in these important social times of their lives, what the fallout is going to be from staying home for those 2 years.
Yeah, I read an article, I think about maybe a year ago, talking about how some kids lost the ability to be potty trained. So they learned how to be potty trained and then they lost it because, you do need that social conditioning. So I think it's pretty fascinating to see how that reverse happens. I've talked to some professors in other colleges outside of the school I study at, and they mentioned how the kids seem not stupider, but they seem far less informed than pre-pandemic. They need to kind of hold their hand more, which I guess makes sense because I kind of got that feeling in the few interactions I had with undergrads in my master's program. I don't get too much now in PhD. They go, no, you're a little bit too foo-foo for the undergrads now. Which is kind of sad because I like undergrads. They're a lot of fun. Compared to the PhDs who go, well, this is serious work. You must analyze everything and write historiographic interpretations of food being eaten in the 1920s. And you go, is this really that important?
And there was another disease called monkeypox.
Ah, yes, the monkeypox scare, which kind of turned into nothing, but it was pretty scary at one point.
Yeah. I think it was misrepresented in the media a little bit for a complex amount of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Ebola, right? Where kind of the disease sounds terrifying. It's easy to spread. And then eventually I think people got a little bit too smart living in a COVID world.
Yeah. People
got too smart and they just were able to circumnavigate the monkeypox. But the monkeypox was one disease too many, however, for perhaps one of the more controversial figures in America, for some a hero, to some a devil. And that is Dr. Fauci, who retired this year or is going to retire.
And some think the reason that he did that was because he thought the red wave was going to happen and that he would be tried for not being the best dude out there.
Well, I mean, I have to admit there are probably some things that maybe Dr. Fauci may have cut corners on, but I do think that Dr. Fauci has done his due diligence for America. But I get why some people might be pretty upset at the guy. But then there are people who also died that didn't die of COVID, right? Right, Caesar? Like there's a particular monarch that just died of old age.
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth, she died at the age of 96, which is a great old age to live to. She was queen for a very, very long time.
I mean, she was monarch for so long that she was monarch before my parents were born, which tells you something, It's shocking to see someone who's been in that position for so long suddenly just go. But, Queen Elizabeth also died controversially. People thought that she was the epitome of colonialism, and now her crown's passed down to Charles, who is trying to do some good things with his position, but also is mired in controversy because of his past. So it's kind of interesting to see how Great Britain kind of goes, yeah, I respect the Queen, but not all of us do, right?
What's happening in Britain with the royal family is probably the least interesting thing that I can think of. It just,
really?
It bores the hell out of me.
I mean, I get it. It's because we're American. We got rid of the monarchy so long ago, Caesar. This is about America. We are a free country who broke free of the British monarchy. So Queen Elizabeth means nothing.
I did jump online the other day and exchanged some Christmas songs with some British people. They gave me a couple of songs that we've never heard of here in the United States. And I shared a couple the one that I shared was There's No Place Like Home for the Holidays, which would make no sense. That would make no sense for them to have because it's a song about American geography from Pennsylvania to Tennessee or whatever,
Quite a few of those states are named after British provinces. Like New York is named after York. New Jersey is named after Jersey. New Hampshire is named after Hampshire. So I think the British people would maybe care. And they go, hey, ain't that Jersey? They call it New Jersey, mate. Is it as pretty as Jersey? And you just have to go, no, New Jersey's not as pretty as Jersey. Sorry, New Jersey. That's I know you're the butt of many a joke, but including mine.
I'm surrounded by people from Jersey here down in Florida.
Really?
It's an interesting bunch.
Oh. That can be taken as either a compliment or a severe indictment.
Yeah, let's move on.
Before we get in trouble and they go, oh, you see those Midwesterners, what have they done? They've targeted us New Jerseyans. How dare you?
Elon Musk bought Twitter.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. As I kind of expected, it was kind of a mess because he goes, well, it's free speech, and then it's not, and then it is, and then you fire a bunch of people, and then you post a poll, and you go, hey, do you want me to be CEO? And of course, naturally, Twitter, the place where people get canceled, just went, no, obviously not. And Elon went, okay.
I was listening to an opinion that he knew that they would do that, and he wanted out anyways.
Yeah, it's a clever way out.
Right.
I think, just for the sake of time, Caesar, let's conclude this here with a little bit of some rundown of sports, because obviously you cannot have the year without discussion of people running around in spandex. So first we have the Rams beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl. Kind of a big shock, as the Los Angeles Rams became Super Bowl champions again for the second time in their franchise history. And alas, the poor Bengals, this is their third Super Bowl loss. Sorry, Cincinnati fans. I'm just rubbing it in as someone who lived in Cleveland for 8 years. This is Cincinnati's third Super Bowl loss. But it seems like the Bengals are doing pretty good this year, so maybe it'll be their time in 2023. Kansas beats North Carolina NCAA Final Four and winds up winning the whole thing. Shout out to Kansas, where my family calls it the flat state where it's too boring. So sorry, Kansas, but you might agree with that.
Circle Fields. Have you ever flown over Kansas?
No, I've not. I've driven through it, though.
Looks like an alien landscape. But anyways.
There you go. So that's kind of interesting. I always just think it's just flat and pretty mundane. But I get it, though. It's a pretty peaceful place, though. So I get that my people want to move to Kansas. But personally, just not my cup of tea. Georgia beats Alabama in the college football playoff championship. Usually it's Alabama beats X. But this time around, the Bulldogs finally pull through and crush Alabama. But perhaps most importantly, Cincinnati. University of Cincinnati gets into the college football playoffs, which was kind of a big shock and kind of a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's the first time somebody outside of one of the mainstream conferences really got into the playoffs.
Right. And now it looks like that will not be the case this year. Seems like the mainstream conferences have taken over the college football playoffs again. And then Michigan made into the playoffs for the first time, but we're not going to talk about that as much because they lost. But they look good this year. Golden State wins the NBA championship, much to perhaps my chagrin, being a former Clevelander. I was hoping that they would win and would just go to Boston. But then again, I'd have to hear my New England relatives go, Boston won, Boston number one. So in the end, pros and cons of that one. But congrats to Steph Curry. He's probably officially now in most people's top 10 lists of all time. So shout out to him. And then you got the Colorado Avalanche, the first time that they won in years. They win the Stanley Cup and they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, kind of the dynastic team at the moment in the NHL. It was fun to see the Colorado Avalanche pull it off. They've been kind of building up to this point for years, and they crushed the Tampa Bay Lightning. It was pretty decisive, actually. And then Tom Brady retires, and then unretires, and then gets divorced.
Yes,
that one's pretty straightforward. Tom Brady just got maybe a little bit fell in love with football a little bit more than his own wife and just said, I'm coming back. That was probably a very bad idea because Tampa Bay is not doing so great right now, to the point that they could lose this division even though they're below 500 and everyone else is below 500 in that division at the moment. Then, of course, this one's a little bit painful for Caesar, but the Broncos, Russell Wilson, the trade. Maybe we shouldn't talk about it too much.
This is going to put us back for 3 years at least, probably 5.
Yeah, who knows? But the point is, Russell Wilson thought he was cooking. Turns out he cooked nothing.
It was like $40 million or something like that. It was like a lot of money. And then the Broncos traded away their future and basically got zilch in return.
Speaking of teams that got effectively zilch, Deshaun Watson also signed for 240, then got suspended, and then he went to the Browns, and now he's kind of been terrible, like really terrible. I think he's lost 3 or 4 games, or he's only won 1, which was against my hometown team, which kind of sucks. But all the same, Deshaun Watson got into some serious hot water. Let's not talk too much about it here, but I think most people would agree that Deshaun Watson did something kind of nefarious, and he kind of does deserve to suck right now.
It's just all kind of gross. I don't like talking about it.
Yeah, it's just slimy. The USFL, which came back after all these years. I remember I saw one game. I only saw one game, which is a tragedy, but the alternative leagues in the NFL is a great idea, but each time they just run into money problems. Yeah. But the USFL, I think they actually survived the whole season.
They saved money by playing every game in Alabama. Like nobody had to travel the entire year, but there was nobody in the stands either.
Well, it is your first season back after 30 odd years. So, baby steps, right? Baby steps. Then the MLB had a lockout and obviously players wanted more money. MLB kind of said no. And then there was a fierce debate over that. And eventually I think the MLB kind of conceded a little bit and allowed the players to get a little more money. Or correct me if I'm wrong, season on that one.
I don't know the details of it. It was kind of a non-story because they only held out for a week and then they played the entire season. They made up games by doing doubleheaders.
That's true. But most importantly, Houston beat Philly in 6 games. And we had the first no-hitter team since the 1950s in the World Series, which was a huge, I actually saw that game, which was pretty interesting. Wow. And it was done by Houston, and Houston was pretty dominant near the end, but Philly had a good chance at the start. And then Houston just with that dominant pitching.
And they didn't use trash cans. They did not use trash cans.
No, this was legitimate. And plus Dusty Baker finally got his first World Series title. So I'm very happy for Dusty. He's been working so hard to get that dang thing.
Yeah. He used to be a Reds coach. So
yeah. So shout out to Dusty Baker. You glorious old man. Then, of course, Aaron Judge, you kind of technically, with an asterisk, set the single season home run record. Of course, it belongs to Barry Bonds, but we know somebody was taking a little bit extra to get those home runs. Meanwhile, Aaron Judge is pure physical beast, pure all natural. But
he seems like a good guy, so I was kind of happy for him.
Absolutely, it's great for him. Nothing much else to say about the Yankees because, I guess you could say boo the Yankees. Screw them.
I'm not a Yankees fan. not a fan.
I'm an Oilers fan, so I've been just falling in love with the crazy Oriole magic, but I won't go too much into that. Otherwise, we'll be here forever. But then, however, some major things happen, though, around the world of sports, and I think we got to talk about this. And this will be the final thing to kind of end it off because it's the last major thing of this year, really. And that's the World Cup. I watched quite a few games. I actually know soccer a little bit. It's actually probably the sport that I'm actually most familiar with now, which is kind of weird because now I look at the NFL. It used to be NFL, but now I don't know half of the players' names. I'm like, who's that? I'm like my mom and my dad. Look at TV like, who's that? Who's that person? And like NHL, I know a little bit. I know a little about each sport, but soccer seems to now be because still the names I remembered when I was younger, they're still in there. Like Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo. Those are names I remember. And I'm like, oh, they're still playing good. I actually can still be in touch with the sport. But surprisingly, Lionel Messi, at the age of 35, got the job done. Of course, with the rest of his wonderful team in Argentina. They beat France, and perhaps many would call perhaps the greatest soccer game ever played, or at least the greatest World Cup final ever played. And it was a glorious moment for Messi as he held up that World Cup trophy high and got that weird robe that at the end, I won't say it's not weird, but he definitely got that odd Sheik's robe at the end that, Messi was wearing as he was hosting the World Cup. But most importantly, this was his first World Cup title in practice only, and this might settle the GOAT debate once and for all. Almost everyone says that the little Argentinian man is the greatest soccer player to have ever touched the pitch, and I think that's a great way to kind of add an exclamation point to a pretty established and illustrious career.
I don't know if you watched the post game, but it was very emotional. Messi was the only one that wasn't crying.
Absolutely. I think Messi's response is, finally, we got here.
He was so happy.
Messi didn't need to cry tears. He just went, I've been dealing for this for 8 years. The rest of y'all just got here. I know why you guys are crying, but I think for him, it's like, finally, it's over. I finally got this, trophy.
It was more relief for him than anything. And of course, there was, what was his name? Kylian Mbappe.
Oh, Mbappe was sensational. The hat trick, the first time in decades that we've seen a hat trick on the World Cup final, pretty sensational moment. But of course, that World Cup was also quite controversial, being hosted in Qatar in the first place, being hosted in December. And of course, the allegations of maybe the World Cup being rigged, but also the death of an American journalist in Qatar kind of got a little bit spicy, but it looks like that's kind of under investigation. So we'll see how that all turns out. But perhaps the most interesting sporting event of the year is a great way to end off this episode and conclude things off, as it is kind of the last major event of a very long, very out there 2022. And so to kind of conclude things off, we obviously wish you all a wonderful holidays as it now gets close to the new year, and it might be even the new year when you're listening to this. So perhaps we wish you all a wonderful new year and hope you had one if you're listening after January 1st. And for those out there, just be prepared for more exciting episodes from us as we continue to do our stupid things and continue as these two wonderful idiots decide to navigate life through their own crazy ways. And perhaps you'll see some really fun and out there episodes in the future. So be on the lookout for those. And we thank all of you for a fantastic year and for being so patient with us and our crazy schedules.
All right. It was good talking to you, Fred.
You as well, my good old Caesar salad friend.
Happy New Year, and hopefully you get that. I guess the PhD's a few years away, right?
A little bit, but we got through the first semester. That's most important. All right, listeners, thanks you all again, and we'll see you all later.
Later. Thanks for listening to the show. The Great Big Intergalactic can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, Apple iTunes, and anywhere else that podcasts can be heard. If social media is your thing, you can follow the program on Facebook or Twitter. If you enjoy the show, upvote, share, like, and subscribe. Whenever and wherever those things can be done. If you'd like to send feedback, the easiest way to do that is to email the show at tgbiuniverse@gmail.com, TGBI as in the Great Big Intergalactic, or you can leave a voicemail at 216-200-7940. Contributions could include written feedback, audio submissions, voicemails, or potentially even live guests. It was great having you today, and see you next time.